Bigger, bolder, faster. Boom, I'm going to the maximum. I'm going to the maximum.
All right. Oh, guess I should sit here. Look at this. A nice light panel. We'll get a lot of talking in. All right, we got 25 minutes to put 50 minutes worth of content in. So each of you has a very unique perspective in the space. What do you feel the most relevant, timely business applications or cases for XR, VR, AR look like over the next 24 months?
24 months. Hello, mic check. Hi everyone, I'm Team Sky. I'm an architect by day and a club DJ by night. So since pre-pandemic, we've been doing virtual and augmented reality for architecture, real estate, and tourism sector. So since pandemic, since the lockdown, our property sectors and brokers and real estate agents don't have a way to sell their condos and residential units. So that being said, in the next 24 months, I feel like the real estate sector will push using VR, immersive technologies, and augmented technologies for property selling. Yeah, that's it.
You got something to add to that?
Yeah. I think that's really appropriate. The framework I kind of use is what are the frictions to the opposite, like the physical world version of it. So in that one, it's like a really good case. Like people just can't physically go there because of COVID. But that's going to even. But what about like the next level of thought where it's hard to. Why do I have to build the whole house before I really view it and before? I mean, because people aren't really good at seeing those CAD images on the table with an architectural diagram. Why not actually just make or like those little teeny tiny renders that you see in those movies or whatever? Why not actually have people be able to walk through and get the entire like a normal retail experience just with real estate? And I think if you like think about that, like what is that across different industries? I think there's a lot of compelling industry across tons of them.
Good. I want to hear your opening thoughts, and then I'm going to build on this because I have already 3 things in my head I want to.
Sure. So I've worked on VR training projects. So in the industrial area, if warehouses want to train workers, if they want to assess their skills, they can put somebody into a virtual reality simulation and see how they perform under different conditions. They can replicate with a digital twin and see, okay, let's get this person accustomed to the environment and to the job tasks that are going to be used. And that's a really valuable way that's also safe. You avoid putting somebody into a live production floor in virtual reality, so you're not going to have those accidents. They can learn a lot better how to use the equipment, this heavy machinery that's in there. So these are all very good uses of this technology.
So as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of entrepreneurship, and this is biased, this is not based on fact or some Harvard data study, but the anecdotal thing I would say is I think a lot of us think about consumer, right, in the consumer metaverse, and whether we're all going to be wearing goggles and running around in Unreal 5 kind of engines with outfits on. And not that that's not interesting and not that that's not massive and emerging, but the industrial metaverse, which you were starting to allude to both with architecture, with kind of predictive planning, AI-infused design theory, things like that, is a really interesting use case, I think, for XR, AR. Are you focused in, which area are you focused in, and what can entrepreneurs that might be focused on the industrial or the consumer metaverse learn from what you guys have been working on?
I'm mainly, personally, tangentially related. Blockchain. I work a blockchain protocol, so it's mainly, more and more of our lives, more and more of these businesses are moving digital. So what does ownership mean, where you don't want necessarily one entity controlling all that ownership, or it's more just governed by a permissionless. It's code, right? So I guess that also is just a very, very, very general thing, and doesn't necessarily mean exactly metaverse, but it does mean like the digital representation of what is next. Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to give, you guys can answer the question however you want, but I'm going to build on, I want to go deeper on that just because from the blockchain standpoint, there's kernels that matter like identity. What is identity, right? How do we manage it? How do we deal with it? How do we even describe it? And then what is the edge network identities that we have, and how do those kind of mesh into whatever XR, AR, virtual, or just physical experience that we're having, because we want to be able to bring ourselves and our assets, whether they be physical or digital, to every conversation that we want them to be in. We may not want them in every conversation, but when we want them, right? And then we want to own them at the level that we want to own them, and that might be different for each person. But from that perspective, how much infrastructure, protocol level wise, because we hear about interoperability and all these things, right? How much is left to go? How early are we still there, or how on time are we from your perspective?
I mean, I don't think we've even really defined what those primitives look like exactly. I think your framework is really good. Identity is both a certifying entity saying you are this thing. So like, the American government gives me a passport and they, I have defined my address and they give me a number or whatever. But there's also kind of like my identity is what I choose to be, in my physical world of like fashion, whatever I am. And I think a lot of those concepts are going to translate to the digital world. I'm gonna have some certifying entity that maybe it's a video game saying I got to a certain rank. Maybe it's, I don't know, some entity saying I took out a loan. I don't know. And then I get to also choose my identity in some ways. Like maybe it's the set of NFTs I decide to have in my wallet that I interact with the program on any given day. So, and the design space in between there is pretty enormous.
So from your perspective, whether it's industrial or consumer, what are the things that you've learned building your business and operating day to day that an entrepreneur might be able to glean some insight from as they try and figure out if they want to build something in this XR, AR, VR, haptics world that is going to ultimately support the experience that we have when we're immersed in these multiple different metaverses? What have you guys learned? And you can pick whichever vertical you want, because
For entrepreneurs, I feel like VR, AR, or even metaverse will benefit them a lot, especially now we are in the, for me, metaverse, we're still in a baby stage, we're still in the early stage. It's like the dot-com era, early 2010 to 2012. So I advise the entrepreneurs here in different industries, not just in architecture, real estate, or tourism sector, but also in the medical field, finance, gaming, content creation, media, parties, to try and see what's in the metaverse. To answer your question, we're still in the early stage. For me, we're still in the dot-com era, like the AOL since like 2010. So.
cool. Adam?
So if you're talking entrepreneurship, then a critical thing to think about is money. If you're making just a game and you want people to play the game, fine, but something has to make money for this to really have longevity. So if you're going to think of yourself as an entrepreneur and you're getting into this space, think about how it's going to make money. It has to in some way. So it can be a business-to-business application. It can be, just a consumer application. It could be a game, but you need a way to make the money and, have some revenue in there. So that's a critical element.
I like what you just said, because making money is actually a really important thing to not forget. I have a framework that might be helpful when you're looking at your business model, and I call it the law of compensation, but essentially there's 3 prongs to it. It's the need for what we do, our ability to fill that need, and then how easy or difficult it is to replace us. And there's lots of different examples, but ultimately our valuation or our revenue generation is really based on that third one. How difficult or easy is it to replace us? I want to use that framework, but a segue to the next question, which is the mobile phone, like the iPhone as a platform, is why we could create most of the unicorns or decacorns that have happened in the last 10 years. In other words, before that unlock, you couldn't have Instagram, you couldn't have Uber, you couldn't have, you pick the one, WeChat, you name it, right? And so have we yet, in your guys' opinion, hit a critical mass from a platform standpoint yet that's going to unlock businesses we never could have created before? Or are we still waiting for that thing, whether it's an Oculus thing or AR glasses? Like, are we still waiting for that platform unlock, or do we have it and we just haven't figured out yet how to prioritize investing into it?
Well, okay. So for me, the metaverse world is like an onion. So you're gonna peel it. The more you peel, you're gonna discover something until you get into the core. So that's where we can see if there's a new businesses or new industry applications that can be useful for us, for the community, using the metaverse or VR, AR technology. So I think we need to push and try more products, try more experiences, try more platforms. We cannot be disheartened easily because for metaverse like a journey. So we need to experiment and be gritty about it.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Uh-oh. This might be going get show and tell.
So while he's over
While
there,
he's doing that, yeah, go ahead.
I think this is a progression. So the platform, I'm not comfortable saying yes, it's completely done. I think we have a ways to go. In my opinion, that true metaverse is going to be a seamless transition from augmented reality to virtual reality to a Web3 with a different kind of interface. This is something that I think most of us maybe conceptually can understand, but nobody can truly visualize it in its final form. We're just too far from it.
Were we gonna?
Yeah, so I have in my hand one of the first crypto phones. It's the Solana Saga. And I think the main reason we are doing this is security and making it so that, most of you are even on your phones right now, like this is just like the main consumer device at this moment, like to kind of answer your point. And it is really insecure to do this cryptography in a normal phone. But all of our phones in this room have a secure enclave on the phone that do cryptography today. They just don't do blockchain cryptography. So that's really what we really need to, as an industry, move forward. But the problem is those same industries that control our phones are the ones who are going to be most disrupted by not owning our data. Apple, Google, those. So it's something like as an industry we need to think about how to unlock that problem, and then we can think about other AR, VR, because all of these things can have secure enclaves that really have great user experiences around your keys, and so the user that could be, and that's how you start abstracting these things away from the user. Like with the Saga, we actually have a ledger. Like Ledger Nano attached to it, so the user doesn't even have to know their keys. They just generate them and then tie them together, and so they don't have to they never even have to know what their key phrase is, and they know that they have a backup at home if anything was to happen to their phone. But and no apps can actually interact with the keys either. So all they can do is sign. So these are the type of experiences that we need to move to as an industry, or else we're just going to have a bunch of people who have no idea about technology passing around seed phrases and
Yeah, I think, so that goes down a whole other rabbit hole, which I would love to nerd out on with you after the fact. To keep it on the topic of this, I think I'm interested to hear, so I relate to the metaverse as a mandate for brands, businesses, however you want to relate to it, to create a parallel strategy for how they're going to move a customer through that customer journey. And it's a mandate because if you haven't done that in your physical business, like if you don't understand from awareness all the way through loyalty, what those touch points are, how you stack rank against the competitive nature that you're in, and where you win, then that's a problem you got to fix. But once you've done that, now you have to do it again. And now you have to do it as it relates to this unreal or this parallel universe that we're all living in simultaneously. And even if it's nascent right now, the opportunity to build a strategy has never been more important, in my opinion, because it is early enough where you don't have to have it all figured out. But if you wait to build the strategy, or wait to understand and look at what that roadmap and that customer journey is in the metaverse for your customer, then you're going to be way behind because your competitor or some startup is already doing it. What do you feel like XR or AR or VR or any of these kind of augmented technologies, what do you feel like they could be an accelerant for as it relates to a touch point in the customer journey for, you pick a brand or an industry or whatever you're working on? Like what would be a good use case or something that would open up people's idea to what the power of this could be as an enablement? Because I think it's more of an enablement maybe than in the short run than it is a platform, but that's just my opinion.
For me, what works in our business, VR spaces, in the future would be selling. Because right now we're doing a lot of live selling, such as for Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So what if we can do VR selling, VR commerce, AR commerce for brands, and like I said, in our industry for the real estate properties, such as whatever the brands. I cannot disclose to our clients, but basically VR commerce, AR commerce, all about selling, from live selling, from the typical Web 2 such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, to Web 3 metaverse. Yeah, that's it.
So I was selling social media service back in 2008, 2009 to bars and restaurants. They were asking, what is social media? What is Twitter? What does that mean? That's for bars and restaurants. Today, pretty much every bar and restaurant has a Twitter page, at least in the US. I assume here too, this is the world that we live in, right? People are on their phones. So I think back at that time, it was an unknown, but they needed support to get there. They knew that they needed it, but they didn't know how to get there. That's very similar to today's world, whether it's Web3, whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality. Business owners are focused on their own business. They need help from the people who are tech-oriented to get there. So I think to answer your question, at Lure, we are focused on helping our retail clients who are primarily fashion industry right now get there. They don't know what that means, but they know they need to do something to reach new markets. So it's just kind of doing this hand-holding journey for your clients to get them where they need to be.
It's so funny. I'm going to date myself now, but my first ever direct sales job, I was knocking on doors for 6 months in 1999 selling small businesses websites. No one bought them, right? We have a Yellow Page ad. We're good. I'm like,
Here's a floppy disk.
so you think about that, right? Like 1999, no one wanted a website. And now the first thing they do is go to Squarespace, Wix, or whatever, buy a URL after GoDaddy. And like, we're only 20 years past that, right? And that's how much we've changed. So this is kind of where we are in metaverse, right? We're saying Web3, metaverse, and they're going, yeah, I don't need that. I've got Facebook, but again, history repeats itself, right? It's funny. That's a good analogy. So final question, unintended consequences. I like to think about unintended consequences as we're building whatever we're all building, right? What do you think not the dangers, because that kind of frames it a certain way. What are potential unintended consequences that would be less desirable that we could end up with if we don't put real design thinking around our approach with XR, AR, VR?
I think one of the main problems that a lot of really compelling experiences come into is they start almost like the opportunity cost of that person's like life or them being a productive human being. And if your experience or your metaverse or whatever doesn't have production in it or doesn't have some value creation in it innately, you can just run yourself into these kind of like race to the bottom, incredibly like too intensive or too short-term thinking about how your users engage in it. And you already see that being a problem with the TikToks of the world that can be really compelling. And so I think we should be really thinking about how our users and what does healthy long-term engagement look like?
Healthy long-term engagement, that's important. Got anything to add? What are unintended consequences that you hope we don't end up with?
I agree with him. So I feel like we need healthy consumerism. Like you said, you talk about TikTok. So if we're gonna go there in the metaverse world in 5 to 10 years from now, I feel like we need to do some regulations for the consumers, not to exploit it too much. So healthy consumerism is the key, because anything that we can exploit is not good, right? So anything is too much, rather it's not good. So.
So I'll just throw in, our culture, I think, has had some unintended consequences from having phones in our hands all the time. We start to lose the ability to connect with other people in a way that, growing up I was forced to do because I didn't have cell phones, right? So I think the unintended consequence and possibly a danger is heading more into that, whether it's just an AR, glasses on your face, a VR headset. If we don't have really good avatars with, some expressions that match humanity, I think we have a big danger that we just continue to stop being able to communicate with each other. That's a major risk. So.
I agree with that one. I think we're out of time. So thanks, guys. We did what we're supposed to do. We got out of here in 25 minutes. So thanks, everybody.
Hey.
Hope you got something out of that.